All right, testing. Can y'all hear me? Okay, perfect.
All right, good evening, everyone. It is 5:30. I'll call this policy committee meeting to order. Ms. Schopp, may I please have a roll call?
Absolutely. Greg Schneider,
Present.
Megan Miller, Amy Levy.
Here. Thank you.
All members are present, except Megan Miller.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, is there a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
So move.
I'll provide a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from our February 7th policy meeting?
So moved.
Second, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously as well. That brings us to policies for review. We'll begin this evening with policy 443/447, Student Code of Conduct and Discipline. Just a couple items to lay the groundwork before we dig in. Thank you to the administration for providing the rationale. It's brief. I'll read that aloud in case others don't have it open. It says the recommendation is to pull offense codes and procedures for responding to violations from policy. This allows administration to be more responsive to the needs of the district. It allows the administration to bring clarity to the offense codes, and it allows the administration to align practices to other work being done related to the strategic plan. So again, thank you to the administration for providing that rationale. I will throw in my 2 cents and then yield the floor to Board Member Schneider. My concern is that Code of Conduct policy has been in place since 1976. Variations of that policy. There have been edits over the years, and I don't see a reason to remove the information from policy. However, I also have no problem with replacing the current policy with the information provided in the Code of Conduct guidance, unless the administration has a strong reason for us not to do that. So I'd like to hear from you, Board Member Schneider, and then you, Dr. Garrison, if you have any comments you'd like to share on that.
Sure.
I have no concern with the edits that are proposed here, but since many other policies refer back to this one to look at the actual code of conduct, I think that we need to have a cross-reference to where the actual document is stored at the end of this, so that since we're referring back to it, at least then there's a link to get to the actual code of conduct.
Do you have any concerns with the new information that has been provided, the Code of Conduct guidance, with replacing that with the information that has been stricken from policy 443-4/447?
I do not have any concerns with that, no.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Garrison, do you have any objections to replacing the information that the administration is requesting to be removed with the Code of Conduct guidance that was provided?
So yeah, the Code of Conduct guidance is something that we want to, dig our hands in a little bit more as well. As it stands, some of the guidance that we have is a little bit, I want to say, not to say necessarily outdated, but it's something that we want to make sure that our practices are and our buildings are still strong with what we have here in the Code of Conduct. What we have done, Board Member Levy, is we've put together this very short presentation as it pertains to kind of what we were thinking, to provide some more detail as it pertains to kind of where we are with the Code of Conduct in our district. And so if that's okay with you, we want to run through this just real quick, 5 or so slide presentation to kind of lay out, kind of what we're thinking as pertains to this code of conduct guidance.
I think that would be wonderful, but I do have one quick question. Are you saying that the administration is still working on the code of conduct guidance? Is that accurate?
Yes, what we want to do is some of the codes and the code of conduct guidance is, like I said, some of it's outdated. Some of it I don't believe should be in the policy as it stands. I believe we should probably remove some of these outdated thoughts per se, and put it differently in writing. And so, as it stands, we want to dig a little bit more into the codes. They don't always line up with how we actually are practicing things right now in the district as well. And so that's why we want to put this presentation together so that you can kind of learn just a little bit more as it pertains to what we're thinking. And then, of course, have the board, decide on it. We would want to remove the code of conduct guidance and make it more of an admin reg versus having it inside of the policy. But that's why we're here today, to have that discussion.
Okay, yeah, please move forward with the presentation. I'm sure we'll have more discussion afterwards.
Perfect. And so I'll turn it over to Missy. She's there. She will be able to, of course, walk us through the presentation, and I'll jump in as needed.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Garrison. I also have Eric Weir. He's the Director of Special Education and Student Services with me helping to present. So Dr. Garrison asked us to create a presentation that kind of guided our thought process in pulling the offense codes out of the code of conduct. So the introduction here is just really looking at that recommendation and that explaining that we see the code of conduct as a framework within working with our restorative philosophies that we've been really pressing on the past 2 years to resolve conflicts prior to exclusionary discipline. So like he said, the bottom there is the recommendation to committee would be to pull the procedures on how to respond to behavior violations out of policy so we can have more flexibility to make changes as needed without coming to committee. So what started our thought process on this is we do have federal identifications within the school district, both ESSA, and IDEA, Every Student Succeeds and Individuals with Disabilities Act. As a result of those identifications, we've been tasked with doing continuous improvement work, which we've done probably the past 2 years. We've really been working on root cause analysis and then engaging in systems changes. We can't change, we're not out to try to change a student or a family. We've got to change the system so that the student can be more productive and achieve better in our systems. And so part of the continuous improvement work also is to look at policies and make revisions to policies so that we can improve student outcomes, close achievement gaps, as well as address any equity concerns. Eric's gonna talk about intervention.
So one of the big things that we are really striving to move forward with is to increase the amount of preventative measures that we have in place to support students in allowing them to be the most successful. And one tool to be able to do that is to increase intervention opportunities. So if a student finds themselves up against a possible code within the code of conduct, instead of quickly moving to a disciplinary action, supporting buildings to really dig down into why maybe that violation occurred. And in instances where we maybe have some lagging skills, giving the buildings opportunities to support the student through intervention to increase those lagging skills so that they can grow both social, or I shouldn't say both, but they can grow socially, emotionally, behaviorally, and academically so that they're no longer finding themselves in some situations. And we want to make sure that buildings have every opportunity to provide those interventions in order to help students be successful. This next slide just kind of outlines some of the core beliefs that we've established through our continuous improvement work. And those are really that students, staff, parents, guardians, and the community are essential to creating and maintaining positive learning environments. School environment has to be physically, socially, and emotionally safe for every student that comes into our buildings. That the Code of Conduct truly is a framework to facilitate teaching and learning by establishing clear expectations and developmentally appropriate consequences for students. That we focus on desired behaviors which are communicated, taught, and modeled continually throughout the school year at all grade levels, and that conflicts are handled with respect for the rights of all individuals that are involved.
So our rationale for making the recommendation is really, we're kind of following the same cadence like we did with AODA a couple of months, not even a couple, more than a couple months early, just pulling the procedure so we can be more flexible and responsive to the changes that we need to make without coming through to committee. And we can be responsive to the needs of the district, bringing clarity to the offense codes. So like, for example, right now we're working on the federal reporting, and we have, I think what Dr. Garrison was referring to, we have codes that are a little bit subjective, and we're not sure how that's affecting our federal reporting. For example, we have fighting and physical aggression. You might code it as physical aggression, I might code it as fighting. We don't know the effects of that as it's federally reported. So just kind of really taking a look at that, aligning that to the work that we're doing to work towards the goals of the strategic plan. So that's where we're at, and we're happy to work through the draft policy that we brought forward.
So how about this? I think first of all, thank you for the presentation and for pulling that together. That's appreciated to give additional context, because this is a significant shift. So thank you for that. I think this is so amazing. It definitely needs to be in policy.
Yeah.
And it looks to me, and push back if you feel differently, that it is written in such a way that it gives space for administrators to use their best judgment. In fact, that phrase is even used in there when it talks about, at the end, jurisdiction and use of the code of conduct. It gives lots of options there for administrators. So I don't see this as being written in a way that is restrictive or would cause administration to come back to the committee and then to the full board if you want to make changes, because it is a framework, and it's at the administrator's discretion in so many areas. Right. So I guess before we move forward, is the administration okay with potentially replacing the information that you all recommended to be removed from the policy and replacing it with the guidance? I guess that's step one.
So, go ahead, Missy, first. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would respectfully ask that if that's the decision that we're going to go in, we would need to just hopefully come back to committee one more time.
Oh, absolutely. That you are reading my mind.
Okay.
Because I think step 3 on my
Yeah.
list was, it seems like this isn't complete today.
Yeah.
And what I would like to do is talk through any areas of concern that committee members have.
For sure.
And then turn that back over to the administration so you can polish it up and then bring it back to us. Dr. Garrison, are you okay with that?
That's correct. I was like, it's not completed, so
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
where we were at. Yeah.
All right, everybody's fine. Let's take a few minutes, and we'll just go through the document as it is, or as it is proposed, and see if we have any notes to give back to admin. And then, does April seem like a reasonable timeline? And Dr. Garrison, thank you for the email. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but I did respond. Our regularly scheduled April meeting is during spring break. No one is interested in doing that. So if we shift to April 10th, hopefully that is agreeable for everyone. But is April 10th enough time to make those edits, or do you want to just intentionally schedule this for our May agenda?
I think May will probably work better, only
Perfect.
because we have spring break there, and gearing up to spring break, people won't be here. So that week we won't have, if that makes sense.
That's
to
perfectly
do extra
fine.
work.
So just a side note, Dr. Garrison, we will schedule things for the April meeting that need to be updated but can be addressed in that time frame, and we will look to see this again at our May meeting. All right, perfect. The other thing that I want to address before I yield the floor to Board Member Schneider for any edits, does anyone oppose to changing the policy numbering from 443/447 to just policy 443? And I saw in the notes, let me scroll, please. So potentially it would be policy 443, student code of conduct, because there was the request to remove and discipline, even though discipline is included. I know, Michelle, I know why it was,
Yeah. you
okay.
are, yeah.
Does anyone oppose to, all right, perfect. So when we finish off this policy, potentially at our May meeting, the new name will be policy 443, student code of conduct. All minds clear on that? All right, perfect. I want to have two separate discussions before we move forward. Board Member Schneider, the first discussion will be anything that is in the current policy with respect to the edits, and then we'll move to the code of conduct guidance. So just the policy as amended. Any questions or comments?
I have no questions or comments on the edits that are proposed, other than I think we need to cross-reference the actual document of the Code of Conduct, and maybe to have an indication as to where that guidance is. If we don't include it in the policy, that at least it's references to where that can be located as to.
No, that makes sense. And I think where we're at is we're going to include it in the policy. So it will become the policy. I just had a few things. On that first page, Ms. Shope, where it says the third green portion, the superintendent or designee, I think that is a nice way to open the policy instead of starting with respect for the law and those persons in authority shall be expected of all students. I'm not saying we should have that, but I think we should start with that paragraph that's the third green section. Ms. Shope, does that make sense? Okay, is anyone opposed to that? All right, so we'll move that paragraph up, and then once that paragraph is complete, the second paragraph will be respect for the law, and then we will, the second portion where it says respect for real and personal property, can someone explain to me what the difference is?
No.
Okay, is everyone okay with respect for personal property? And then continue, okay, perfect. Ms. Shope, let me know if you need me to stop for anything. Okay, so that's gonna be the header, and then we would roll into the proposed code of conduct guidance. So last call for any edits for the policy outside of what is presented and what we've discussed. All right, perfect. The code of conduct guidance, I will just say this. I think it is beautifully laid out. I love the introduction, the mission, the vision, the equity statement, the philosophy behind it. I think that's a really nice lead up to the framework that we're presenting. So with that being said, Board Member Schneider, I'm going to yield the floor to you. Any questions on the color-coded or the language that comes before? Any questions or edits?
I have none.
All right, I have a few. The second page of the code of conduct. So I'm counting the one that starts with introduction as the first, and then lagging skills as the second. At the very end, it says the following are types of restorative practices encouraged by SDB, and then it says insert new root. Instead of having that sentence there, could we just cross-reference that at the end? Is anyone opposed to that? Or do you want to list out those items?
I'm fine with whatever the team decides on that. I'm not torn.
Thinking time.
Say again, Dr. Garrison.
I'm fine with whatever the team decides on that. I'm not
Okay.
torn on the statement.
Okay.
But Missy and I, we haven't asked Eric and Missy the question, so I want to see what their thoughts are.
Right. And again, from my perspective, if it's important to you to list those examples, then absolutely just plug them in there. Or we could cross-reference it at the end. And I don't have a preference either way.
I'm not sure that we have at this point, formal documents that would make sense with a cross-reference, if I'm understanding what you mean by cross-reference.
Well, so here's what it says. So that last sentence says, the following are types of restorative practices encouraged by SDB. And then it says, insert practices taught by New Route. So we could list those there as the note instructs, or we could take that document, like if it's a ton of them, and cross-reference it and hopefully hyperlink it at the bottom.
So what about this? What if we list them in here for next time and see if we like that? And if we don't, we'll cross-reference it.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to the next page, which starts with the first color coding with levels 1 through 4. That level 4 says administrative policy 447.3. That should be either board policy or Board of Education policy, or we could just list policy 447.3. I would like to include the title, though. It's student suspension / expulsion, and I'm fine with either iteration of that. And then the thing that concerned me at the bottom of that page, it says the school district of Beloit retains the right to report any violation of federal or state criminal law or municipal code to the appropriate law enforcement agency. If there is a federal or state criminal law being violated, I would think that would be mandated to report, not a reserve the right to report. Am I missing something?
Probably strike that.
Okay.
I don't think that's necessary. I think as we kind of walk through this, Board Member Levy, some of the levels, we're working on some of that language in each of those as well.
Yeah.
You will see the edits, but I want to make sure that you're aware of that too.
No, thank you for reiterating that. We are aware, and I think this is a really great start. So the purpose of this brief conversation is just to provide some of our feedback. So when you all go back and fine tune it, you'll already have those comments in mind. When we go to the next page with level 1, with a possible intervention, support, and consequences, and I see that apology is listed. And so my question is, are apologies forced? Like for littles, say you're sorry. I have hesitation with that because if someone isn't sorry, I don't want people to be made to apologize if they're not sorry.
And if they're not ready, right?
Right.
No,
So it's just a question.
they should not be forced.
Okay.
No, just an option.
Okay. All right. And then the use of restorative practices. And the reason that came to mind to me, let's say you have one student for whatever reason hits another student, the other student didn't do anything. Again, restorative practices, is that presented as completely voluntary? Because if a student has not wronged another student and they are not interested in participating in restorative practice, I definitely don't think that should be pushed.
Yeah, no, at this point, none of our buildings, through the training that we've been doing, all of the restorative practices that are meant to repair harm are only able to be conducted when all parties involved are at a point where they're ready to and willing to participate in something like that. It's not ever forced, and it would not continue, and it would not ever be forced or expected.
Perfect. So then I'm going to jump down to level 4. I'm not sure what page that is, but it's in the red. And under intervention / consequence, one of those is possible police contact, and it has an asterisk. But there's not an asterisk that explain what that asterisk means.
So the asterisks are actually aligned with the numbers in the codes. So for example, if you turn the page.
Oh,
you'll see
got it.
401, aggressive physical contact with a staff member intentional, that requires
Yep.
Police contact.
That makes sense now. All right, thank you so much. Speaking of, when we go to the next page, which starts with 101 for level 1 offenses, if we go to the orange column, the wording just seemed kind of off to me. So aggressive physical contact with a staff member, unintentional use of physical force directly against or affecting a staff member or other other adult who is legitimately exercising, it currently says authority under the supervision of school authority. Is anyone opposed if we adjust that to say, or any other adult who is legitimately exercising authority to supervise? Would we be losing something if we made that edit?
No.
Okay,
Can you,
So-
do you want to repeat that?
absolutely. So I'm on 301, aggressive physical contact. And the second part of that, like the second clause, or other adult who is legitimately exercising authority to supervise.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it, thank you.
no problem. All right, next page, I didn't have any, actually next to 3 pages. If we could jump down to the green column that starts with 106. And then I am in the orange column. And disclaimer, I feel very strongly about this. Okay, let's see if we feel very strongly about the same thing. All right, so self-defense is described as an action taken to restrain or block an attack on another person or to shield oneself from being hit by another person. That makes complete sense to me. What doesn't make sense is right under that, it says retaliation or responsive action, such as hitting a person back is not considered self-defense and will be considered as fighting. I feel very strongly that if I am being attacked, I am not going to shelter in place. And I am not going to leave it to my attacker to determine when the attack is over. I am going to stop the attack. And I consider that self-defense. Now, once I stop the attack, if I am still harming the person who attacked me, then this makes complete sense. Now I have crossed over into fighting. But I don't believe it's fair if a student is minding their own business and they are attacked, to tell them that the only thing you can do is kind of shield yourself and not do anything to stop the attack. I think is harmful. So one, did we feel strongly about the same thing, or was that, you feel strongly about something different?
306.
Yeah, I thought you were the one above.
Oh,
But I
no, we'll
understand
come to
where-
that next.
But I understand where you're coming. It does kind of contradict.
Board Member Schneider, do you have opinions about that?
To me, self-defense can, it definitely include what you have to do to stop the attack.
Yeah.
Self-defense isn't just shielding yourself. That's, you need to stop that attack. So I agree that there has to be some way to define that, the retaliating or responsive action, so that it truly is looking at when it goes beyond self defense into a fight or into something more.
Yeah, continuation.
Yeah.
All right. Those are our notes, so please take those. Dr. Garrison, jump in.
Sure, I think it gets a little gray in this space, especially when we're dealing with kids. Another opportunity is to run. I'm just giving you an example. Is to get away, right? And so I think sometimes I have to be mindful of that because of course, we're running a school district and giving students different opportunities to think about what's happening in the midst of a self-attack. It's already hard, but we got to make sure that we are very, very clear around what we're expecting in these situations. And so I understand what you're saying, Board Member Levy, but also have to make sure people understand this is a very gray area here. Of course, we have surveillance. Of course, we can always look at, that's why administration should be able to kind of look at what's happening to determine what's the best next steps. I think if we were to play with this section right here, that almost could look like we're okay with. I'm just saying that if I'm getting attacked, I'm gonna fight back, and I'm okay with that. But it's also this gray area around what we really want to teach our kids in these moments. And so I just want to put that on the table. It's something that we have to go back to the drawing board with anyway to figure out what's the best wording as you're asking us to. But as I reviewed this, I kind of was leaning towards what's the safest response in a very unsafe situation.
No, and I appreciate that. And if someone has the presence of mind and the desire to run, I'm just going to tell you right now, I would not. That would not be my desire. If I am being attacked, I am going to stop the attack. And I trust that the administration will review the nuances of those situations and very clearly, yes, giving administration the leeway to make good decisions after reviewing footage, et cetera. But just wanted to share our opinions as you go back to do that work. Please tell me the thing that you had strong feelings about, which is not the thing that we just covered.
I thought I heard you say 306.
Oh, okay,
drug
306, yes,
distribution.
share.
Well, and it's more specific to the AODA codes in general. We have a 200 level, which is an offense for use of tobacco. And then we have a 300 level, which is use or possession of alcohols or other drugs. And then we have another 300 level, which is distribution of counterfeits. And then we have a 400. And I feel like maybe we shouldn't have, I feel like we shouldn't have tobacco be a lesser of an offense than any other type of alcohol or drug when we're talking about AODA issues.
We're actually going to address that when we get to because one of my questions is tobacco considered a controlled substance with the policy that we're going to cover tonight? But no, I so appreciate that, and please put that like on the to-do list when you guys go back and edit, because I agree with you. We shouldn't have similar offenses sprinkled in different columns at different levels. I think that can get tricky to enforce consistently. Yeah. Okay, anything else on that page or the one after before we move forward? Okay. I am now on the page that has 109 as the first green portion, but my question is in the orange column. So under illegal recording and specifically unauthorized recording. So it says any unauthorized recording or photograph of another student, staff member, or person's voice or image. My only question is Wisconsin a one-party consent state with respect to recording? And if yes, do we have the authority to suspend the ability in district buildings, school-sponsored events, transportation, et cetera, that whole category that we use, to suspend that right? And maybe that's a legal question, but I just want it noted.
We're taking notes and we will.
Thank you. All right, while we are on that page, any other questions or concerns? I don't have anything on the next page, but the one after that, at the very end, again in the orange column, non-consensual sexual contact and conduct imposed by one person onto another person without their consent. I think that needs to be in the red column. So again, that's above it, it says unwelcome physical contact, that's in the orange column. But non-consensual sexual content, I can't think of a reason why that wouldn't be in the red column. Board Member Schneider, do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with you that that should be in the red column.
Okay, and then the next page is kind of the part B of that when it talks about consent in the orange column. So my question, again, this may be for legal, what is the age of consent with respect to sexual contact in Wisconsin? And I believe, but please ask someone with a law degree, it's 18. So if it's anything under 18, how does that govern what we put in the code? So if we could just be mindful of that, that would be helpful. And then on the next page, which starts with 130 in the green column, my question is actually in the yellow column, 215, tardiness, absenteeism, and truancy. So arriving at school or class after the designated time without permission or without an acceptable excuse. So that information is listed there, and potentially the child could be penalized, but are we taking into consideration our younger kids that have absolutely no autonomy about when they arrive at school? And I get that can be at administrator's discretion, but if we could just be mindful of that, and maybe that will adjust the language, maybe it won't.
Probably just language on that.
Those are all the notes I have for the colored sections. If we can move to the last page that is remaining, Board Member Schneider, any questions or edits on that last page?
I have nothing.
Okay. So the jurisdiction for use of the school code of conduct, I could be overthinking it, but just the note that I put is, do we need to include parameters? Hold on one second. Do we need to include parameters of physically where this can occur? So it's not just in school buildings, but it's school-sponsored events, or then just for consistency, we have cited transportation to and from school-sponsored events. So since we're putting jurisdiction, do we want to include that physical component so people are clear? And then that last sentence where it talks about administrators employed by the school district of Beloit have the legal authority to impose disciplinary consequences when a student engages in misconduct that violates policy of the school district of Beloit. If we could strike that and just adjust H to read, and for those playing at home, it's jurisdiction of use of the code of conduct, and it's A through H. For a policy violation or reason provided by law. That just seems simpler to me to cover that, unless anyone objects.
For a policy violation or,
So we would just strike any other, and so it would read for a policy violation or reason provided by law, which is already there for H.
thank you.
Yep. All right, so those are our notes. Thank you in advance for working through that and making it relevant for our district, and we look forward to hearing more about the progress on that in May. So that brings us to policy 443.1. Currently, school attire, unless anyone objects, if we could adjust that, go with the recommendation and change that to 443.1 dress code. And then before we dig into it, we would be also retiring policy 443.1 rules 1 and 2. So is everyone okay with that before we get started?
Clarification.
Yes.
Are you saying the title would only be dress code? Or are you saying student attire / dress code?
I think dress code is sufficient in case someone has a.
Okay, I
Yep.
just needed clarification on what you
No,
were
that
saying.
makes sense. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Yep, so we will have, moving forward, if approved by the full board, policy 443.1 dress code, and we will be retiring policies 443.1 rules 1 and 2. So with that being said, of what remains of policy 443.1, Board Member Schneider, do you have any edits or questions?
Just one spelling error under the very bottom of the first page. It said students may not wear. The third bullet, it says any item hat obscures. I think that's supposed to be that.
That makes sense. All right, I have a couple. So again, I'm thinking of our littles, and I'm thinking about students that may need assistance with getting dressed. So if we could start with, instead of students are expected to respect the learning community, students, parentheses, with the assistance of parents or guardians as needed, are expected to respect the learning community by dressing appropriately for 4K through 12 environments. Is anyone opposed to that? All right. And then the second paragraph at the last sentence says such exceptions must be submitted to the superintendent or designee for consideration and documentation. So reading this as a parent, how would I know who the designee is? So are we okay with just leaving that as must be submitted to the designee, and then of course the superintendent, or must be submitted to the superintendent, and then of course the superintendent can assign a designee to handle it. But like as a parent, if I'm not submitting it to the superintendent, I wouldn't know who the designee is. Is everyone okay with that?
It typically is the superintendent, then I would turn it to either pupil service or the principals, or we have to identify it. But I'm okay with what you're stating. I'm just letting you know what designee would
Right.
mean. That's all.
Okay, perfect. So Ms. Schultz will have such exceptions must be submitted to the superintendent for consideration. And then, of course, Dr. Garrison can designate whoever is best equipped to handle that. If we go down to students may wear, if we could just replace that capital V, invest, with a lowercase v. And then my question, and this is small, but I'm just curious. So are baseball caps worn backwards, or beanies? Those are perfectly okay in class as long as the face isn't being obscured for identification?
But as long as they're not obscuring their face, correct.
Yep, so like a backwards baseball cap or a beanie, that perfectly fine? All right, perfect. Moving to the next page, which has dress code enforcement at the top. At the bottom of that second paragraph under that header, it says students in violation will be provided 3 options to be dressed more to code during the school day. So more to code is used several times, and I would prefer that we use to adhere to the dress code, because more to code just means you're slightly less unacceptable. So if pick the violation, you just make it a little bit better. That's more to code. And I think that's a slippery slope. So does anyone first object to wherever more to code is present, we replace with adhere to the dress code? All right. And then my other concern was, so adhere to the dress code during the school day. Well, the school day doesn't include like an after-school sponsored event. So do we just want to leave it at adhere to the dress code, period? Because if someone is in violation during the day and then they go to the game that evening, I don't want to split hairs. How does the administration feel about that?
Yeah, it's kind of hard after school hours, or quote unquote after school hours, to determine what they're going to put on. So
no, but this
I'm open.
covers all of it, all school sponsored. So if it's a school sponsored event somewhere else, if it's transportation to and from, like this isn't, like all of that is included in here.
I know it's a slippery slope trying to enforce it. That's all I'm saying. And so the way it's written is kind of meant to have some leeway.
Well,
only because it's hard to enforce it at times. It is.
And I'm fine with whatever the administration thinks is best. But in this policy, it is clear on like all of the places for school sponsored events. It's not just the school day. So I just wanted us to be consistent. So is the intention to say we got through the school day and that's what we were responsible for, but anything outside of the school day, move as the spirit leads you? I just need us to be consistent. No,
I don't know how to answer.
let's not.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I don't know how to best answer that question, because I know it's what we have to end up dealing with. Is sometimes it's in the gray area after school.
I'm just saying it's already written in here.
Be written in there. It has to be, because it's the dress code policy. But you bring up a point that we have to look at from an administrator's point of view as well, which is it does get a little difficult to enforce things at school-sponsored events after school when they got parents at these events and they're with their mamas and, daddies.
I hear you. Do you want to remove it and say that we enforce this during the school day? I'm not saying either is right or wrong. I just want us to be consistent.
Can you just end it with to adhere to the code?
That
period?
was my recommendation.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Got
you're fine.
Following now.
She's right about that. That was her recommendation. I just wanted to make sure everybody is understanding where this gets a little harder for us to enforce. That's all. I wanted to be honest about that part.
No,
That's all.
I am a fan of honesty. I just want to make
What
sure
is
we're
the
consistent.
Eric, Missy, what are you thinking? Eric, sorry, Missy.
I mean, I would support leaving
Yeah.
the school day out.
I would too.
All right. Number 3 in that same section, it says, if necessary, student's parent may be called, if we could just include parent/guardian. And then if we go down a little further, the portion that begins, no student should be affected by the dress code enforcement because of racial, I'm assuming that's supposed to say identity instead of identify.
Correct.
And then I have a question. Now, let me preface this. Whatever the response is, I don't think it needs to be handled in policy. I think it would be more appropriate for an administrative regulation. But just a question, because no student should be affected by dress code enforcement because of racial identity. And then following that is sex assigned at birth, comma, gender identity. So, for example, because one of the things is dress that is disruptive, and I want to make sure that we're being consistent. If we have a student, for example, that was assigned male at birth, but identifies as female and dresses in a traditionally female style, for whatever that's worth, in administrative regs, I think we need to be clear on if that is considered disruptive or not. And if no, everybody needs to be on the same page so that we are not violating this policy. But again, that's kind of the nuance that I think can go in admin regs. But I just want us to be mindful and we give building adults the tools they need to consistently enforce and protect students. All right, so that's my 2 cents. And that is all I have.
I do think that
Yeah.
last sentence might cover what the discussion was above about the school day, because it does say right there, as well as any school-related events and activities.
Right.
So,
And that's why I didn't want it to just say school day, because we've been more extensive, and I want to make sure that the policy doesn't contradict itself. Yep. All right. Okay. If there's no other discussion, is there a motion to move policy 443.1, now titled School Attire, to the full board as amended, and also to retire policies 443.1, Rules 1 and 2?
Thought we were renaming the policy.
Dress code, yes.
Dress code.
Thank you.
So
Keep me together, Board Member Schneider. Yes.
I so move.
Second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Next up, that brings us to policy 443.2, student conduct on school buses. Just want to make a note, this was last reviewed last updated on November 7th of 2023. The reason we are seeing it again is we want to review policies in similar number groupings in case an edit to a sister policy, so to speak, would impact this. We can take care of all of it at the same time. All right, so with that being said, Board Member Schneider, do you have any edits or questions for policy 443.2?
I have none.
I don't either. So we are good. I am not going to make a motion because there are no changes. I learned my lesson, Ms. Shope. You should be proud. All right, that brings us to policy 443.3, electronic delivery device enforcement regulations, which is a mouthful, and I have a couple questions. All right, here we go. First, is nicotine considered a controlled substance?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not anymore. I mean, I should say that.
Not anymore. Okay. So I had like a choose your own adventure in my notes. For some reason, I just wanted to share that with you all. So thank you for indulging me. Okay. So if no, Is anyone opposed to changing the name of policy 443.3 to nicotine delivery device use? Because I have no idea, like electronic delivery device enforcement regulations doesn't have anything in my mind to do with nicotine, and that is the only thing that is discussed.
So the reason why we changed this in 2019 was because that's when like vaping became big.
Right.
So an electronic delivery device is referring to any sort of a vape device. It can be vape, it can be nicotine, it can be THC.
Okay, so
I mean,
vape is not
in this-
nicotine. No.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will learn to live with it then. So we have policy 443.3 electronic delivery device enforcement regulations. Board Member Schneider, any questions or edits?
It's just that if we are changing the number for the
443.
443.
Yep.
We need to modify that both in the last sentence and is also in the cross-reference.
Ms. Shope, I think that can go under one of the minor edits, but can you put a note on there to not finalize it until the board approves it?
I think it's
Just to not make assumptions? And you can make that happen? Perfect. So that doesn't need to go onto consent agenda. It's just once the other thing is approved,
we have one edit.
yes.
We think there's supposed to be a comma in between tobacco and or. I think it's supposed to read the use, possession of, or transfer of nicotine product, including smokeless tobacco, nicotine product, including smokeless tobacco, or other electronic delivery device is prohibited on school grounds. Does that make sense? Okay.
That did not make sense. Can you tell me where you want the comma?
In between tobacco and or. So you're talking about any nicotine products, including smokeless tobacco, separate thought, or a vape is basically what that says.
I support that. Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Let me check my notes. Okay, so that brings us to policy 443.4, student alcohol and/or other controlled substance use. If we could remove that capital in or. And then is anyone opposed to retiring policy 443.4 Rule 1 and including that information in 443.4 using the header enforcement regulations for the information that's currently in Rule 1? Anyone opposed to that?
No.
All right. So with those two modifications, let's first deal with what is currently a part of 443.4. Board Member Schneider, any questions or edits?
I have none.
Okay. My only question is mainly for consistency in that first sentence. The use, possession, or transfer of alcohol and/or other controlled substances is prohibited on school district or below a property. So my question is, what about school-sponsored events, transportation to and from, the kind of category that we have consistently used in other policies?
Is that in the next sentence or no?
It's in this second paragraph.
Oh, help me. Where is it?
It starts, the following actions are prohibited by students in or on school property, in any district-owned or contracted vehicles, or at school-sponsored activities.
Perfect. Thank you.
So does that should that first sentence then be struck?
Okay. Let's think about this.
Yeah, or it's prohibited, period.
Yep.
There you go. So smart.
You okay with that, Board Member Schneider?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So number 4, question. The distribution or sale of prescription, that completely makes sense to me, or over-the-counter drugs. So if my kid gives your kid an Aleve, are they in violation of policy? Do we need to, Michelle is saying, so here's the thing. I'm not saying I'm against that, but I think that's something. So I think policy is amazing and everybody should read it and govern themselves accordingly. However, that does not always happen. But things like that are like simple pitfalls for kids to fall into. If I give you a Ricola, are we like in violation of policy now? I think that is something we need to be intentional about telling students.
Yeah, I hear you. And like Eric said, students aren't even able to carry over the counter, so to be able to distribute them for policy, so to be able to distribute them.
So you got 2 violations going on.
Yeah. But yes, I agree with you, it needs to be communicated with.
Right.
families.
Okay. How, and I don't want to get in you all's lane, but if we could do that sooner rather than later, because kids might think that, I'm helping out my friend who had a headache or whatever. No, you shouldn't have it. You got to take that to the nurse and follow this protocol. And you also should not give it to your friends. If that could happen sooner rather than later, that would be awesome. All right. That brings us to what is currently 443.4 Rule 1. Board Member Schneider, do you have any edits before we transition that into the policy?
I do, in the first paragraph, in the 7th line that begins with, and other drug abuse and dispensary, as enabling, I think that should be as well as.
Okay. Thank you. Good
Okay.
catch.
And the, just a question on the 4th paragraph, just saying that it will be, there'll be training that takes place. Is that actually taking place in the schools? Okay.
Okay. And then my recommendation, where's it at? So we keep everything that's in 443.4, and then we go into 443.4 Rule 1, the information is there. But the paragraph that the last one before the end of the page that starts, if a student member has reasonable suspicion to believe a student has possession of, I think we should move that after the definitions, because you define all the things, and then if you have reasonable suspicion that one of the things we just defined, then this is what you need to do. Is anyone opposed to that? Okay. All right, Ms. Shope, did you get that? Yep. All right, yep, right after 11. Please.
Back in policy 443.4,
Yeah.
the regular policy, did you change the first sentence to say the use, possession, or transfer of alcohol and/or other controlled substances is prohibited, period?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
No, yep. All right, is there a motion to approve policy 443.4, student alcohol and/or other controlled substance use, to the full board for a first reading?
So moved.
Hold on. As edited,
As,
and to retire policy 443.4, Rule 1.
so moved.
Second. Any further discussion on that? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, anyone who knows me knows that I am a fan of words, and I am very excited when we use words according to their correct meanings. All right, that being said, we were at policy 443.5, student use of cellular telephones. Okay, so before we dive into this, I am going to recommend that we change that to student use of mobile phones. And here is my reasoning. So cell phones were previously portable devices on cellular networks that focus primarily on voice conversation and minimal messages. Mobile phones, on the other hand, are a broader category that includes modern smartphones with comprehensive functionality, applications, and internet access. Okay, so that's my pitch for mobile phone for mobile instead of cell. And then phone, interestingly enough, it's important to note that while phone can be used to refer to any device used to make calls, a telephone specifically refers to a device that transmits sounds over a distance using wires or radio waves. You are all the better for knowing that. All right. So is anyone opposed to changing the title from student use of cellular telephones to student use of mobile phones? All right. Thank you for indulging me. Board Member Schneider, any questions or edits?
Just if we're changing the title, we need to change that throughout the whole policy.
So when we see cell phone, make that mobile phone.
Correct.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. It's number 3, right after the information that is proposed to be stricken, the parent/guardian will be notified during the process. Is that logistically feasible, or is the parent or guardian notified after, or is that's included in the process? Like if you need to take a student's phone, you're not notifying the parent or guardian in the process of that, but I would say like by the end of the day, someone would give them a heads up? Or are you all fine with the language as it's written?
The way I interpret this is part of an investigation.
Okay.
That's how I interpret it. I don't know if anybody else does, but it's during the process of the investigation because this paragraph refers to, recording or transmitting audio when it's not permitted.
Perfect. All right. Is there a motion to approve policy 443.5, student use of mobile phones? Well, hold on. If we are just changing the titles, I think that's considered a minor edit. Does anyone see that differently?
I would say you're also changing the sentence. I mean, it's up to you guys, but you're also changing the sentence
Okay.
in paragraph 3. So it's totally up to you as a committee. I just
I
didn't
would
want you to
say-
forget that.
Let's be on the safe side. Let's allow our colleagues to review our work. So is there a motion to move forward policy 443.5, student use of mobile phones, to the full board for a first reading?
So moved.
All right, I will provide a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. That brings us to policy 443.6, two-way communications, electronic signaling devices. And this is just an update, and the update is this policy was deleted. This made me cringe a little bit, or retired as we now do with policy, back on February 26th. Okay, so let me ask you this. Is this policy still retrievable? So it was deleted? Yes. Okay, so we shouldn't use the language retired, because if it's retired, my expectation is we can go in board docs under retired policies and find it. So could we just reflect the update to say it was deleted back in 2013? Perfect. And then I'll just jump ahead. Forgive me if you're a stickler for order, but the same thing for policy 443.71 that looks like it was deleted on that same date. If we could, because if somebody goes back, I don't want them to be confused. Was it retired? Was it deleted? Can I still find it? No, it is gone. So if we could just update those notes for policy 443.6 and 443.71, just to let people know that those policies were deleted on February 26, 2013. All right. Let's circle back to policy 443.7, youth gangs. Board Member Schneider, any questions or edits?
The only question I have is in the fourth paragraph where it's highlighted in green, the last sentence says, school district employed employees will receive in-service addressing gang-like activities as needed. Does that take place on a regular basis or once a year or?
I don't know that that takes place anymore.
But that's what I was gonna say. I don't think that's something that I think that's something we do.
Okay, so I am not a fan of piling on people's plates. However, I am a fan of adhering to policy. And that was one of my notes too. What I wrote was, when will you know it's needed? Because right under that says all school district employees have a responsibility to report any student code of conduct infraction, gang activity to their immediate supervisor. So if you don't have the training on that, especially when we're talking about gang and gang-like activity, I think that puts staff at a disadvantage to make sure that they're reporting accurately. So can we put in the to-dos that training needs to be worked in for staff? If we can head back up towards the top, I have a couple things. First paragraph, the second sentence, the presence of gangs, gang affiliation, and gang-related activity resulting in student misconduct within a school. Okay, so let me read it the way it is, and it made me crazy, and then I will propose my rewrite. Okay, so what it currently says is, the presence of gangs, gang affiliation, and gang-related activities resulting in student misconduct with a school disrupts the learning environment by threatening the safety of students, staff, and parents in the school building and causing a disruption to the interference with, okay, that made me crazy, even the rereading of that. What I would propose, the presence of gang affiliation, and gang-related activity resulting in student misconduct that disrupts the learning environment, period. And then this disruption threatens the safety of students, staff, and guests, and interferes with the academic process. One is, are there any objections to that rewording, which for me makes it easier to read? And if no, Ms. Shope, do I need to repeat anything?
So I may be wrong, but when you were reading it, I feel like the presence of gangs, gang affiliations, and gang-related activities resulting in student misconduct, what?
Which
it
disrupts the learning environment.
Causes disruption to the learning environment?
Which disrupts the learning environment.
Okay, so resulting in student misconduct, which results,
Which disrupts.
which disrupts the learning environment. I still feel like it's like there's something else that needs to be said there. I think a word somewhere needs to be changed because it sounds like you're saying, it's almost like you're saying, because of this, then this. And
Okay, well then
I
here-
feel like there's something missing.
Okay, let's try this. Resulting in student misconduct, which disrupts the learning environment and threatens the safety of students, staff, and guests. Does the administration feel strongly, do we also need to add and interferes with the academic process, or is causing a disruption significant enough that we get it? No wrong answers.
There's no wrong. I think anything that causes this level of disruption is going to cause academic loss. So,
Okay, so
yeah.
we're gonna have a really long sentence, and I could be okay with that. So the presence of gang affiliation, and gang-related activity resulting in student misconduct, which disrupts the learning environment. Okay, so we got it. So does anyone feel strongly, since we have learning environment, can we drop interferes with the academic process?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, which disrupts the learning environment and threatens the safety of students, staff, and guests. Everybody good? All right. Okay. The next paragraph, the second part, where it says a gang is defined, I think that should start the paragraph because I'm always a fan of starting with the definition. So a gang is defined as any identifiable group or club which exists without sponsorship of the school or the sponsorship of a recognized adult community or civic organization. I think we can drop that and engages. It currently says an antisocial or what is antisocial behavior?
I would define it as being like off to yourself, not being involved in a regular, not being involved in your regular peer-to-peer daily interactions.
But how do you engage? Okay, so the way it's currently engages in antisocial or student misconduct or criminal behavior activity.
Can you say that one more time? I'm just
Yeah,
trying to
absolutely.
write it down.
It says, and engages in antisocial or student misconduct or criminal behavior activity. I didn't think antisocial was bad, but is it intentional that it's in there? If yes, I'm good.
I don't think it's intentional that it's there. I think it's something that we have to recognize with some students, though.
Perfect, then it stays. So if we could just drop that, yeah, all right, you're nodding yes. And then my other question, so if we start the paragraph with that, and then I just think this is a little dramatic. As a result of these beliefs, the school district of Beloit hereby bars all gangs. Can we just say gangs, gang affiliation? So after what we just discussed, the new sentence would be gangs, gang affiliation, and gang-related activities are prohibited from school buildings, school-related activities, and school property at all times. Is anyone opposed to that?
That's actually better than that.
Okay. And then if we go down to the bottom, the portion that's in green, the school district of Beloit will work with law enforcement in the case of any known school-related gang-like activity. I don't know what gang-like activity is.
Well, in this term, sometimes there's wannabes and gonnabes, let's say it like that. And so the students that want to be in it and there's students that actually are. And so we have to monitor both. So that's where the gang-like comes into
That
play.
makes me a little nervous, especially if we're including words like antisocial, because I don't want to be bothered with other people. I don't want to be categorized as a wannabe or a gonna be. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't include gang-like activity. I just don't know what it is. And I think just like we identified what gangs are, I think it would be helpful, like what are gang-like activity concerns? But in the spirit of full disclosure, I didn't come prepared with that language because I don't know what that is.
Would you like us to identify gang-like? Like give
Well, I
you
think just
examples?
giving an example, because if I'm an adult that works for the school district of Beloit and it's my responsibility to report this, I want to know what it is that I'm supposed to be reporting. I just think that that would be fair to the people that are charged with executing this policy. And of course, it won't be an exhaustive list, but sitting here right now, I don't know what that means.
I understand.
And then again, I think it is appropriate to make sure that staff are trained so that they're not being held to a standard without training. So let's put a pin in 443.7. Dr. Garrison, do you want to, and you don't have to decide now, but just think about if you want this to come back in April or for this to come back in May. And so that will bring us to, we did the update. Oh, our last policy of the night, policy 443.72, anti-bullying. Board Member Schneider, any edits or questions?
On the third page, the sixth paragraph that begins in green with response to allegations of bullying. Because we're deleting the two paragraphs after that, which talk about what should be included in the investigation, is there a form or an outline for those who are doing that to follow?
Yes, we have a flow chart.
Okay.
Okay, let me just make sure that I'm following you. Response to allegations and bullying?
Right, because
Okay.
we're deleting we have the first
The
paragraph
report,
and the
yeah.
next two are then stricken, which
Yep.
actually identifies what that investigation is. And I'm okay with that as long as what they're using is a checklist to make sure that there is consistency in all of the investigations.
Perfect. And that exists.
That exists.
All right.
It's actually a flow chart, not a checklist, though.
Okay,
Flow
flow
chart.
chart, okay.
All right, we support that. If we could go back to the first page, the end of that first paragraph where it says, an academic impact on bullies, victims, and witnesses. I believe getting help for all people involved, but I want to prioritize victims, witnesses, and bullies. Like, we all should get help, but I have some issues with listing the bully first. Does anyone oppose to that? So victims, witnesses, and bullies. And then on the next page, number 3. So let me back up. So bullying can manifest itself in conduct that is, and then number 3, indirect, so spreading rumors, intimidating through gestures, or social exclusion. Explain to me what that means, because when I first read that, if I don't want to fool with Susie, I am going to socially exclude her, and I think that's my right, because I don't want to deal with you. However, I don't think it's okay to encourage other people to, you know what I mean? Like, if that's your personal choice, that's fine. But for me, that nuance isn't there. So what is the intention for that?
I believe the intention is the latter of what you said. Like,
Okay.
I am picturing in my head, back in my middle school years, like, you can't sit at our lunch table. Like, we're all gonna sit here and you can't sit here.
Okay. Are we comfortable with saying, instead of or social exclusion, coercing social exclusion?
Yes. Yep,
Okay.
Yep.
So if that's your personal choice, I support it.
Yep.
But don't try to pull other people in on it. All right. And then 5, hate acts, prejudice-motivated act, which occurs when a perpetrator targets a victim because of their membership or perceived membership in a certain social group or race. The social group kind of threw me, because that could be socioeconomic. But I don't know if that's a hate crime. So I did a little digging. For what it's worth. It says a hate crime is any criminal act or attempted criminal act directed against a person or persons based on the victim's actual or perceived race, nationality, religion, sexual orientation, disability, or gender. For me, I like that explicitness, because social group, I don't know what that means, social group. Okay. Ms. Shope, do I need to repeat? Yes. Okay. So what I'm proposing, okay, so hate acts, prejudice-motivated act, which occurs when a perpetrator targets a victim because of their membership or perceived membership based on race, nationality, religion, sexual orientation, disability, or gender. You good? All right, perfect. And then the next page, So the paragraph that starts this, and this is talking about the investigation process. The school official receiving a report of bullying shall immediately notify. So my question is, what does immediately mean? And the reason I ask is if we go down to response to the allegations of bullying, it says within one school day. So I just don't, if we can be consistent with the time frame, I would like that, but I don't want to make it so prescriptive that we're violating policy when somebody got to it within 48 hours. Or are you confident that the they get immediately and it's been working and?
I mean, I would be fine. This is based off the DPI model standard, so that's where that language is coming from. I'm sorry, the model policy.
Okay.
So that's where that language is coming from, but in order for it to stay consistent,
So let me ask you this, because I know like with some instances of reporting, I don't care what happens in your day, you have to report it that same day.
a mandated, yeah, like
Is
child abuse
this
and neglect.
one of those instances?
Not by law.
Okay. I think I might have feelings about that, but okay. Dr. Garrison, are you
It's
jumping in?
also, sorry, I'm jumping. I apologize.
You're fine.
It's also hard. It's also hard to, some students may not know it's happening to them until someone actually identifies it. Some students know it's happening to them and identifies it. Regardless of when they let us know, we respond to it. And so I just want to just put that note there.
No, I appreciate that, and kind of this happened a week ago, it's too late. So we definitely would never put children in a position, but this is talking about the school official who, once they receive the report, it says they shall immediately notify, and then later on, there's like a time, there's a 1 day. So I just wanted to make sure that we were okay with that slight difference, and it sounds like we are. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
I might have missed this. It's also is a part of Missy, correct me, DPI like guidance or whatnot. And so
Their model standard, yeah, we talked about that.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Nope.
No, you're good. All right, so that brings us to the last page of the last policy of the night, and it is 650, not that anyone is tracking. All right. Pupil services staff will provide support for the identified victims. And then back, just to be consistent with earlier, we said we're going to get help for the victim, the witnesses, the bullies, which I support. Do we want this to say, or is the intention victims and impacted persons? Because I could not be a victim, but if I witnessed it, I'm an impacted person. Or is that, this is going to sound worse than it's intended. Do we have the capacity to kind of get outside of the immediate circle to impacted people too, or is the intention just for victims?
I feel like I'm thinking about like restorative, and as we're doing circles, I feel like the language could be consistent with what you said in that first paragraph, victims, witnesses, and bullies.
So are we comfortable with saying pupil services staff will provide support for, right now it says identified victims, or victims and impacted persons?
That, I like that.
Okay, and we have the capacity to do that? Okay. All right, my final note, under the disclosure header, the start of the green portion, the policy will also be distributed to organizations having cooperative agreements with the district and will also be available to anyone upon request. So when we talk about people who have cooperative agreements, like students and families get this, I'm assuming, through the student handbook. But do persons and entities that we have cooperative agreements, do we give them the student handbook, or do we get this information to them through another vehicle?
They have access to the family handbook, yes.
Are we comfortable that is proactive enough? Because there are a lot of things that I have access to that I don't access.
I hear you.
Okay, so let me ask you this. How much additional work is it to be intentional about someone who's coming in to work with our students, to being proactive about these are our expectations around bullying and how you report, and I think that's pretty critical, and I'm hoping that
Yeah.
there is a way to organically do that that is not cumbersome.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to be like giving them the policy. We could create like a one page, one pager that they get.
Okay.
And this is saying cooperative agreement, so to me, that means if we have an MOU or an actual contract with people, it's not just, so that seems manageable.
Okay. And just to make sure that doesn't fall through the crack, is there a way to include in the process of finalizing MOUs, like this policy language with that? So these are the expectations in our building. Or maybe if it's not like, here's this policy, but like, these are the things we want you to be familiar with, like bullying, the drugs, the whatever, and then give them the handbook. I just think that that's more proactive than. Okay, and that's manageable?
I think so. The only thing, what's going on in my head is I'm like thinking that we have a lot of MOUs, and
Yep.
not all of the MOUs are with organizations that directly work with students.
I would say it would
Yeah.
only be
So I just-
applicable to organizations
Yeah.
that have direct access to our students.
Yeah, I just don't know if we should add that language, or if we just.
Or even just include it. Like, when we finalize MOUs, this is the additional information that we give them, so everyone's on the same page with respect to reporting.
Got it.
Okay. All right, look at us. Is there a motion to move policy 443.72, anti-bullying, to the full board for a first reading?
So moved.
All right, second, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you, everyone. Again, we've done great work. Our next meeting date is actually going to be not as normally scheduled, but Dr. Garrison, unless you object, we will go ahead with what you proposed with the Wednesday, April 10th date at 5:30 right here. All are welcome. Oh, it's tentatively, all right. It's right there. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, second, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone, we're adjourned.